students like Shahad, who you will meet in a moment, to learn the collection, to give presentations like these, to give tours, to work with the museum in really creative and fun ways. And so we are starting to do some of these outreach programs together as well. So we are so excited to be here today. And you have the pleasure to meet, hopefully, Shahad here. Shahad, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your major and what you're studying, that kind of thing, before you dive into our fantastic program?
Yes, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Shahad Salman. I'm a sophomore student at Cornell University, and I'm studying global and public health sciences on the pre-med track. And I'm also minoring in education. And like Anne-Marie said, I'm a student educator intern with the Johnson Museum this semester. And it's just been a really exciting semester, I think, because we've just had an opportunity to meet so many cool people and just hear of so many people's different experiences. And I also just wanted to thank you all for entrusting me to deliver this program to you guys today, and for also welcoming me into your guys' wonderful organization. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm so excited for our presentation today. Okay, I will share our slideshow and get started.
So Java, tradition in Java, Indonesian puppet show.
Yeah, so today we'll be talking about Wayang theater tradition in Java, Indonesia, which is a preeminent performing art in Java, Indonesia, that's been practiced for over 1,000 years. So to best understand Wayang, I think we must first travel to the Indonesian island of Java, where Wayang first originated. Wayang is considered the oldest freestanding puppet form, with historical scholars tracing its earliest forms and widespread development to sometime between 1800 to 1500. The chief puppeteers are called dalang, and there are multiple theories about when and where Wayang first originated. The dalang themselves credit the invention of the art form to Wali, the 9 saints who converted Java to Islam. The story goes that 2 saints presented the first puppet in a performance at the local mosque to attract people to Islam. Many of the epics portrayed intertwine both Islamic, Hindu, and Buddhist stories, leading others to hypothesize that the origins of Wayang are connected to India and China. All performances are generally infused with the religious and philosophical tradition. And in this video, I just wanted to give you guys kind of an insight on what Java looks like, and also just have us kind of really immerse ourselves in where Wayang takes place and kind of the culture that surrounds it. And I think Carol was sharing with me that she lived in Java for 2 years, which is so cool. And I really want to hear more about that after our presentation. So the puppets themselves are called Wayang Kult, and Wayang meaning shadow and Kult meaning leather. The Javanese shadow puppets are traditionally created out of buffalo hide, and the handles and support are made out of buffalo horn, materials that are local to Java. Wayang Kult is respected as an heirloom or a puska, which is a practice passed down through generations. Recently, I think more people have been training outside of just elders, but usually it's been passed down from a parent to a son or daughter, or whoever it may be. To make one large puppet, it may take upwards of 3 to 5 months, and several artists are involved. In this video, you can see that an artist is outlining the details of the Wayang figure onto the raw hide. And then I think you'll eventually see, or if you already saw it, there's also a mallet on the table, and that'll later be used to punch special tools called tata through the hide and create the detailed silhouette of the figure. And I just want the video to play a little bit so we can just see the process, because I think it's so fascinating, and it's just so detail oriented. That's honestly just I don't know, it's bewildering for me, how many hours and how many hours and just energy goes into making one puppet. And I think those are the tata tools or the carving tools. So after the hole punching is completed, water-based paints are used to paint striking and intricate details onto the hide. On the left, the shadow puppet represents Batura Guru, the king of the gods. He's an embodiment of the Hindu god Shiva, who regulates revelations, gifts, and various sciences to other gods. All Wayang characters are made in strict accordance to certain iconography. So Batura Guru is the only shadow puppet depicted with the position facing forward towards humans. You can see that from the position of his feet, which are facing forward, but then the rest of his body is turned to the side, indicating that he's looking at us or towards the audience. The different and unique features of the puppets reveal their social status and psychological qualities as marked by their size, color, and other details of the puppet. And then in Wayang Kult, the characters are created utilizing 15 eye shapes, 13 nose shapes, and 11 mouth shapes, which together with their specific costumes, headdresses, crowns, and jewelry typify the certain characters. The noble, so-called alus characters are usually the small characters. The strong gaga characters are larger, and then the demons, full of aggressive power, are the largest. To provide another example of a character with distinct iconography, this is Samar, who's the principal jester in a Wayang set. In Javanese tales, Samar is the first principle that emerges from the cosmic egg at the beginning of the universe. During shows, he's usually introduced during the scene called the Goro Goro scene, which translates to world and chaos. In the scene, the puppeteer speaks of the earthquakes and storms that are going on in the cosmos, and then announces that Samara appears like a shaft of light, piercing the dark, providing some sort of comedic relief. He embodies both the role of comedy and divine wisdom, and he may address the audience directly in shows, discussing issues of the present. In his unique iconography, he's almost always presented with these specific features. He has a pot belly, which symbolizes him swallowing the Great World Mountain. He has this protruding belly button, which isn't present here, but is usually present in other forms of him. He has a tuft or bump on his head, which is said to be the axis of which the universe turns. And then he has a white, yellow, red, black check pattern on his sarong, and that's linked to sacred binaries and quintiles like day, night, life, death, the 5 elements. Again, representing how a lot of Wayang tales speak of philosophical and religious traditions. So to set the scene for what it would be like to attend a Wayang show, the Dalung performs from dusk to dawn, an occasion of ceremonies and celebrations, sometimes having a show last a full 8 hours, if not more. Wayang is central to Javanese culture, and beyond its entertainment value, the performances serve as a medium for reflection for community members. It's described as a conception of soul, psychological forces of courage, purity, and will are embodied in characters that play a part in the grand epic that is each human life. And this picture is actually from a photo essay of a journalist who attended a Wayang show. So performances are accompanied by a gamelan, which is a traditional orchestra made up of bronze gongs and other percussion instruments and a chorus of singers. Each principal character in the show will have his or her own musical theme called a leitmotif, and the music generally dictates the narrative of the show. If there's a plot twist, if there's something exciting happen, the music will usually rev up to indicate that. And I just wanted us to listen to a part of this performance because it's just so amazing and just this really unique form of music. So I'm actually going to start over from here.
And hear it.
Oh, sorry.
We still can't hear it, Shahan.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, so that was just a snippet of a performance by the gamelan, and later on we'll see a video of them accompanying a show, and you can see how it kind of is really integral to kind of just the feeling of the show and our understanding of what's happening in the story. The shadows of the puppets in these shows are representing an outward expression of the characters in the world. One art journalist described it really well, I think. They said, these elements form a symbolic framework expressing a worldview in which the heroes, villains, and great wars of mythology aren't to be thought of as living outside of ourselves, but as an intimate force within each of us. And I think we can best understand how powerful and impactful these shows are through the writing of a court poet that was documented in 1035 to 1049, who wrote, there are people who weep, are sad and aroused, watching the puppets, though they know they are merely carved pieces of leather, manipulated and made to speak. These people are like men who, thirsting for sensacious pleasures, live in a world of illusion. They do not realize the magic hallucinations they see are not real. And even though that quote has kind of a negative connotation on the emotion invoked by the performances, it kind of just tells of how impactful these shows are and how the audience members truly get immersed in them and use them to reflect on their own lives and their own daily lives and how they relate to the characters. Some of you might be wondering, why is so much energy and labor exerted to make these colorful and bright puppets if the audience is only going to see their shadows? So interestingly, Wayang performances can be viewed on either side of the screen. Starting in the mid-1990s, audiences were allowed to sit behind the puppeteer or the dalang in favor of seeing the colorful side of the puppets. This proved to be like a more engaging form of Wayang theater, but still there are many people who like to sit on the shadow side. One history expert explained that the silhouette has a lot of detail, but there's also space in it that the audience can often make connections for themselves, because we do have a nose, a mouth, and an eyelash, but because there's also there's room to place someone that they know on that character or an experience they had on that character. And then the dalang themselves, which you can see here performing, they display such an extreme versatility and diligence in their performance. They simultaneously act as a narrator, a director, and a singer. And they'll often manipulate their voice to portray all of the characters of the different genders, and they'll portray the good and evil characters. And just even performing for 8 hours has to take so much endurance and so much talent. And oftentimes they also infuse their own personality, adding humor and improvisation in this oral tradition. And in this didactic form of teaching, the dalang hold an esteemed role in their communities, even outside of just their shows. They teach about good and bad manners, lessons about how to live a good life, and they spread political messages from the local government. It's said to be that when there's someone running for a campaign in a community, they'll ask the dalang to insert that in their own show, just because the dalang has such an extreme reach and can reach up to thousands of people within just one performance. So I wanted to show you guys kind of two of the epic tales that are oftentimes reference through two of the puppets that we have at the Johnson Museum. A lot of it is sourced from, a lot of the shows are sourced from the Ponji tales, which relate to Prince Ponji and his ongoing search for his wife, Chandra Kirana. So the Ponji tales in relation to names, events, and dates and places have similar events to actual histories from the 15th century East Java. And there's a multitude of Ponji tales because they have spread from Java through the islands onto mainland Southeast Asia. And then this shadow puppet character is used in the story of Raminya, in the story of Ram and Sita. And in the story, Sita is stolen away by Ravana, an ochre king, and the narrative follows Ram's attempts to recover her. And throughout this journey, Ram is assisted by the monkey king, Hanuman. So I wanted to end the presentation by us having watch one of an example of a performance. This is a really great one because the gamelan is just playing so beautifully, but also you can really see the detail that's in it. And let me know if you guys can't hear or if the volume is too low or anything.
langit kelap-kelap katon lerkin sanging alus sang malaikat drum sabarang kapuru katon ukir moyak mahaye saking kapali simur yo i Sakat Tio Aporo ora sakat Amrito Wibisono nuwun pangandikan dawuh Koko Rabu aning bali patu Koko Wibisono boten sanes ngaparaken sumu kemeng pangabekipun wonten sahandap Koko Koko Rabu yo wis tak ompo ora lewat kepenak manggon wungku kateng ngira.
I just wanted to give you guys a really quick snippet of what a show might look like. Like I said, these shows usually last for hours and literally go from dusk to dawn and are super immersive. And then if we go to the earlier part of the video, you can see, I think that's a gamelan sitting behind the white screen. And you can't really see the dalang, but they usually sit behind the screen too. And there's an oil lamp that they use to silhouette their wayang kul. And yeah, I wanted to leave the rest of the time to kind of hear about any experiences you guys might have in watching these performances, but also just to hear your guys' thoughts on how you even felt like watching that little clip and kind of what it brought on to you. To give a little bit of contextualization, I think this show was specifically, it's called The Prosperity of Wibisana, sorry. And it's basically a tale that, I don't know specifically that whole narrative, but I know it's generally a telling to teach people about the dichotomy between good and evil. And I even read somewhere that there's a specific entrance for the good characters. They come on the right side, and then the evil characters enter from the left side, which we saw that distinction between the characters on either side of the screen. But yeah, it's just a really performing art, and I'd love to hear from you guys now. Or if you have any questions or anything, I'm really happy to answer.
I think that one thing we should know is that on the 5th floor, and I think it's probably still there, is a beautiful display of Indonesian puppets. And that just gives you, it's not in black and white, they're in full color. And it's really rather extraordinary. So next time we're there, maybe we can make a special trip up to take a look at it.
Yes, and you guys should also, we have in the education studio, we have an actual puppet that you can hold and use. It's not the expensive puppets. I think it's just one, a more commercial one, whatever that would mean. But it was really cool because I got to hold it and you can really clearly see the fine details. And then I'll actually show some of the ones at the Johnson. These are just I don't know if these are all out on display. I know there are some that definitely are, but these are some of the puppets at the Johnson, and they are so beautiful to see in person.
Did you say how long it takes for the people to train to make these beautiful puppets?
Yeah, so I think the artists themselves who create the puppets are distinct from the dalang, who have to train in the oral tradition of it and have to train in performing. To make the actual puppet itself, I think I read somewhere that it takes, for a large puppet, it may take up to 5 months, if not longer, to make one. And it usually involves, I think it also takes a long time because it involves several people. So there are people that are the ones that get the hide and make the silhouette in it, and then there's also the painters who have to add all the detail into it, and then they also add bronze or gold leaf usually. So it's a super complicated process that involves a lot of collaboration within the community. And then for the actual performing art of it, I didn't read a specific timeline, I guess, but I know that there are like schools that have been established to teach people and like take just like the regular route of like a university or college, or like a kind of like vocational school also.
Thanks. And the audience, are they like, do they know the stories? Do they talk when they're watching it and cheer and do things like that during the performance? No.
I think a lot of the tales that are told, the audience is really familiar with, because they tend to be just like traditional tales that are either that they either know like through their like faith or religion, or they're just um kind of like things like when you like your like parents would tell you as like a to teach you like manners or whatever, but then they're like visualized through the Wayang performance. So they generally are really well known. I'm not super sure about like if they like how they like vocalize it like during the performance. I would assume so, because I feel like it's definitely not like a normal like theater show where you have to like go and like be like super silent the entire time. It seems a lot more like community oriented and like really wanting to like include everyone. But I think it also may be difficult because the gamelan is like pretty loud, and like it might be hard to like talk over them, I assume. But I assume people are like really into it and like really excited about it.
Yes.
As I said earlier, there is a Cornell gamelan group. There's a Facebook page, and there are YouTubes that are available. If you Google Cornell gamelan, you can find YouTube performances of the Cornell gamelan group. And I am going to keep my eyes out open for performances, and maybe there'll be some later in the spring, and we'll notify LLH members of it so we can see it actually happening before our very eyes in Ithaca.
I think we also actually had a Wayang performance at the Johnson like a couple years ago. And they have a recording of it. Like if you guys go to the 5th floor, I think that's of it, but it's like so amazing.
Right.
Yeah, just to add to what Shahad was saying about the audience being extremely familiar with these stories, as she mentioned at the near the beginning of the program, all of the characters in the stories that are being told have very clear, identifiable features that everyone would be familiar with. So it's really this visual communication. These puppets have all kinds of symbology within them that everyone would know and understand. So yeah, they're very familiar with the stories.
Wendy?
Yeah, how often are these puppet shows, shadow puppet shows, offered within communities? Is it just related to religious celebrations or holidays, or is it a kind of a more frequent occurrence?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest, like most like glamorous performances are usually in accordance to like some sort of like ceremony or like religious ritual. But they can just happen at like birthdays or like anniversaries or just like parties or whatever it may be. And then yeah, sorry, not to put Carol on the spot, but I think she also mentioned earlier that they had like performances just happening like across the street on like in the daily market. So I think they're like more like simpler performances that can happen like more occasionally. And it's also unique because it can happen like anytime during the day, because like they just have to like shine their oil lamp and like can't perform. But yeah, I think the like most prominent, like most the biggest ones are usually like because of like a celebration or a ceremony. But I think there are more like daily practices of them, especially because the dalang or like the puppeteers have such a big role in their community. And like outside of the performances, they act as like spiritual advisors and healers for a lot of their community members. And so I assume in giving that advice, they probably like try to do it like through the like Wayang performances, or like try to incorporate like aspects of that in their guidance. Has anyone been to a shadow puppet show that like is not Wayang theater, but like is similar to it?
I was trying to think of like a contemporary, something that we have in our culture that was sort of equal. I couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because like the only thing I can think of is like finger puppets, but I feel like they're definitely not as culturally significant or like how as big of a role. Oh, and something else I read that was super interesting was that like because wayang is such a big thing in Java and Indonesia, like some like live actors or like in classical theater, they like borrow the like they borrow like they're influenced by wayang theater and they like use that, they adapt that to their own like live performances, which I thought was so interesting. Like the shadow puppets are influencing the people versus the other way around.
I remember seeing, I mean, this of course is, almost 70 years ago, but I remember seeing dance performances in which the people who were doing the dancing were dressed as though they were the wayang puppets. And the stylized motions that they made were the kind of motions that the puppets make.
Mhm.
So it was, I mean, it was very interesting because it was, people imitating the puppets, which are imitating people.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
this turn and turn about. And in those days, it was sort of like a rock concert. I mean, they didn't have rock concerts. And in fact, they were very suspicious of American rock, for instance, and American music and American blue jeans. And I mean, nobody wore blue jeans because they were a sign of America, and America was not uniformly admired. And so that in those days, this was a very popular common person kind of entertainment. It wasn't it wasn't only for people who thought of themselves as artistic or as interested in drama. It was what people went to. And the gamelan that practiced across the street from us was people who, had quite, menial labor jobs in the daytime, which is why they practiced at night on weekends. But of course, things have changed so much, I'm sure. Back then, the tradition was that men sat on the shadow side and women and children sat on the side where you could see the dalong and the puppets and the gamelan. And there would usually be just the dalong and one female singer who sang sort of set pieces. The dalong was the one who did the whole thing, kept it all going. And the singers would sing what were, in essence, more like arias. And they did always last all night. And the clowns always came in. The clowns were divine figures, three of them, and some more was the sort of leader. And they would come in after midnight usually. And they were, I mean, Sukarno was a dictator and there was not much free speech and you had to be very careful. But the clowns could make political references that nobody else could dare make. I remember one time seeing a Wayang performance when one of the clowns, a clown isn't a good word for them, but one of them tried repeatedly to sit on a throne, and the throne kept tipping up, and there was a you know, a Wayang figure of a chair, and the chair kept tipping up and tipping him off. And this was clearly a reference to Sukarno. And nobody would have dared to say anything like that in public or in print, except in this context.
Mm.
So it was a very, very interesting, you know, cultural and political experience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like that like provides such a clear image of in my head of like what the shows were like. And yeah, exactly. Like they just, it's like a good outlet, I think. It's like a good, like kind of like, it's not like really a news outlet, but it's a good outlet for like political commentary. And also like a lot of the performances do incorporate things that are happening in the modern day. And like the implications of that. And yeah, they're very like didactic. It's a very didactic method of teaching. But like you said, I think it's so interesting because it's like everyone can participate in it. It's not exclusive to like the artists of the community. It's just like a common practice.
We lived in a section of Jakarta that was like a suburb, and it was a mixture of real houses, stucco houses, and laborers' houses that were made out of bamboo and banana leaves, essentially, and terracotta tiles that were put on the roofs of these. But they could be taken down and carted away in a cart. And so the people who lived across the street were living in this kind of shack. But I remember one night when we went to bed and we heard a Wayang performance, and we thought, well, where can this be coming from? And we thought, this is very weird because it must be a radio, but they don't have electricity across the street. The whole kampong didn't have any electricity. And when I asked our Babu Dalam the next day, our servant, what was that? She said, well, the guys across the street sit on the sort of porch of their shack, and they have a radio that takes batteries. And so they listened all night long to the Wayang. And interestingly, although they were Sundanese, and that's people who lived in West Java, and the Wayang that they were listening to was Javanese and from East Java, and the Sundanese and Javanese had a certain amount of tension, but nonetheless, the Javanese Wayang performance was something that everybody listened to and enjoyed.
That is so interesting, especially because the performance is like so visual that they can still be so engaged in it, like on radio. Oh, that is so cool.
Well, to sort of modify that a little bit, I was reading also that the popularity of these performances has started to decline a little bit in the region as they've embraced pop culture a little bit more, and upcoming generations are a little less interested in learning the old Javanese language and tradition. So they do have, some regions have a hard time finding up and comers for this art form. But UNESCO has protected it under, I was just looking at it, as one of the masterpieces of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. So they are trying to salvage the knowledge, to retain the knowledge.
I wanted to pick up on Carol's talking about the clowns. because we were we lived in with the Hopi Tewa reservation, and one of their dances, they have clowns, and again, they are exceptional people who have exceptional rights. The whole village comes out to dance, but that means a kind of regimentation that they dance in a large oval or a circle around the plaza. The clowns are absolutely free to run in any direction at all. And so they control the crowd. If the crowd isn't behaving the way they want, they'll come and scold them. They came over and scolded me because they saw that I was drawing and it was forbidden to have any representation, which I didn't realize, but I thought no cameras, but they would let me draw. Well, they wouldn't let me draw. And they came and scolded me for a long time. They also go to refresh the dancers so that there are watermelons in the middle of the plaza, and they go and pluck out pieces of the watermelon and put them in the mouths of the dancers so that they have some refreshment. And all together, and they have top knots. They're dressed almost undressed with body paint and a big straw top knot, so they look foolish, but they have tremendous freedom. But I'm interested to hear about the clowns in this Javanese dance.
This is so interesting because I feel like, even in Shakespeare, there is a level of respect for, for the comedic relief, right? I mean, this idea that there's wisdom in humor, I think, is something that seems to be cross-cultural, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, that's exactly what I read too. And I just wanted to bring up the picture of Samara again, because that is so interesting to hear about a physical manifestation of his character and what he was how people actually imitated his dress and looked like him in other cultures. Because I didn't know that was a thing. That's so interesting. He's described as a jester, but yeah, it's the same exact principle where it's he his comedy and humor isn't meant to dilute his wisdom. It's instead supposed to reinforce it. And you guys were saying, give him the autonomy to kind of speak about things in this kind of comedic way, but they have a lot of they're very serious topics, and they are all culturally significant topics that need to be discussed in some sort of way. But it's hard to do that without this kind of character to have that relief. I think also that just comedic relief of being okay, this is something I don't know, a dictator, it's hard to talk about that experience, but then also have that protection of being oh, I'm just a jester, what do I know? But it's that there are actually very wise characters who play such an important role in their communities. That is so interesting to hear, though. I didn't know cultures had them just had actual jester characters or clown people who were their occupation was to be a clown.
Yeah, makes me think about Falstaff, right? From the Henry V, fourth and third.
Be an interesting, well, somebody must have done it, topic of research to see
That's right.
How it is cross-culturally.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I think we're about at time. So if everyone could just help me thank Shahad for our first student-led